117. That is the number of flash flood warnings issued so far this year by the two National Weather Service offices that cover most of the New York tri-state area, Upton on Long Island and Mount Holly in New Jersey. It is more than any other year on record. The statistics only go back to 2008, but within that period, nothing comes close. And it is only the end of July. That number is the actual story of this week, and it is bigger than the storm that produced the last of it. Because the storm has now gone. It came through on Tuesday and Wednesday. It dropped an extraordinary amount of water on New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and eastern New York. And by Thursday, the region was drying out. Today is forecast to be mostly sunny. But before it left, it pulled cars off roads in 2 states, put 20 people in the water in a single New Jersey city, dropped more rain on some towns in 24 hours than they normally receive in the entire month of July, and killed at least 1 child in a river that was running high. In the next 55 minutes, I'll take you through exactly what happened across those 2 days. Place it against the record that this year has now set, and then get to the part that actually matters, which is why the New York metropolitan area specifically has become one of the most flash flood vulnerable large urban regions in the developed world, despite having no mountains, no canyons, and no burn scars. That answer involves a published engineering number, a category of housing that did not exist in the building code, and a sewer system designed in the 19th century. Let me start with the sequence. The National Weather Service issued a flood watch covering all 5 boroughs of New York City and parts of northern New Jersey, running from 8 o'clock Tuesday morning. Forecasts called for widespread rainfall of 2 to 5 inches, with isolated locations receiving considerably more. To calibrate that, New York City's average rainfall for the entire month of July is 4.62 inches. The upper end of the widespread forecast was more than a normal July, arriving in about a day and a half. More than 36 million people ended up under flood watches, in a band running from Philadelphia through the New York metropolitan area and into southern and western New England. Tuesday afternoon, the storms went up over New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and they behaved in the way that produces the worst outcomes, slowly. Stewartsville, in New Jersey, recorded 4.73 inches on Tuesday alone. Several locations in northern New Jersey logged an entire July's worth of rain in a single day. And parts of New Jersey and New York recorded between 6 and 8 inches of rain in 24 hours, against a monthly average in those same towns of roughly 4.5 to 5 inches. 6 to 8 inches in a day, and places that expect 5 in a month. In Paterson, New Jersey, 20 people were rescued from floodwater. Video from across the region on Tuesday showed cars trapped and floating, not stalled in a puddle, but lifted and moving, which is what happens when water reaches roughly 2 feet against a vehicle. A car becomes buoyant far earlier than most drivers believe, and once it floats it, has no traction, no steering, and no brakes. Then, on Wednesday, the system did the thing that made it dangerous rather than merely wet. It slowed down further and intensified. Forecasters noted that the storm's strength on Wednesday was more comparable to a system you would expect at a different time of year entirely. A deeper, better organized low than midsummer thunderstorm complexes usually produce. And it moved north and east into the Hudson Valley, the Catskills, and eastern New York. Rainfall totals in several areas of eastern New York topped 7 inches. In Guilderland, near Albany, cars were stranded in floodwater and multiple roads closed. Footage from that scene shows a man carrying a child out of one of the vehicles, and then helping another person walk through water that was waist deep. I want to pause on that image, because it is the most instructive thing in the whole event. Waist deep moving water is beyond what most adults can stand up in. The force water exerts scales with the square of its velocity, which means a modest increase in speed produces a large increase in force. 6 inches of fast-moving water can take an adult's feet out. At waist height, in a current, an average person is being pushed with a force they cannot brace against. and once you are off your feet in a flooded street, you are being carried toward whatever the water is draining into, which in an urban area means a storm drain, a culvert, or a stream in a concrete channel. That man in Guilderland was doing one of the most dangerous things a person can do, and he was doing it because there was a child in a car. In Chatham, New York, firefighters rescued a United States Postal Service mail carrier whose delivery vehicle had become stuck in floodwater. In Rockland County, Clarkstown police responded to flooding near the Palisades Center Mall and closed all eastbound lanes of Route 59 at Cemetery Lane, keeping westbound open and asking drivers to find an alternate route. Those are the small, ordinary, unglamorous emergencies that make up a flood event, a mail van, a shopping center car park, a closed lane. Multiply them by several hundred across 2 states, and you have the actual texture of the week. And then there's the part of this that I have to tell you plainly, without decoration. In New Jersey, 2 10-year-old children were caught in the Passaic River, which was running high because of the rain. The body of a 10-year-old boy was recovered. A search was underway for a 10-year-old girl. I am recording this a couple of days after those reports, and I do not know the outcome of that search. It may have concluded by the time you watch this, and if it has, the reporting will be more current than anything I can tell you. What I will say is this: the Passaic is not a wilderness river. It runs through one of the most densely populated corridors in the United States, past Paterson and through northern New Jersey suburbs. And for most of the year, large stretches of it are shallow, slow, and entirely unremarkable, the kind of water children have played beside for generations. After 6 to 8 inches of rain in a day, it is a different river. Not deeper in a way you can see from the bank necessarily, but faster, colder, carrying debris, and with a current that will take an adult off their feet, let alone a child. That transformation is the single most dangerous property of flash flooding, and it is why the standard advice is so absolute. The water does not look like what it is. A river running high after rain looks like a river running high after rain. It does not look like something that can kill you in 30 seconds. At least 1 child died in this event, and that is the cost of the week, against which every number I am about to give you should be read. So why here? The tri-state area has no mountains to funnel water, no canyons, no burn scars, no steep terrain of the kind that produces flash floods in Colorado or Texas. It is, geologically speaking, a fairly gentle landscape, and it is one of the most flash flood-prone large urban regions in the developed world. There are 4 reasons, and they stack. The first is impervious surface, and it is the big one. In an undeveloped landscape, rain lands on soil and vegetation. Some evaporates, some is taken up by plants, and a large fraction soaks into the ground, moving slowly through soil toward a watercourse over hours or days. The land acts as a delay mechanism, converting a violent burst of rain into a gradual release. Pave that landscape, and the delay disappears. Roofs, roads, car parks, pavements, and driveways absorb nothing. Essentially 100% of what falls on them becomes runoff, immediately. And it arrives at the drainage system within minutes rather than hours. In the densest parts of the New York metropolitan area, impervious coverage runs extremely high. What you have built, functionally, is an enormous shallow funnel with a drain at the bottom. The second reason is what that drain actually is. New York City's stormwater network was designed to handle rainfall of approximately 1.75 inches per hour. That is a specific, published engineering figure, and it is the single most important number in this entire subject. It is what the pipes under the streets were sized for, based on the rainfall records available at the time they were designed. Now put it against this week. Forecast rates in earlier July events reached up to 3 inches per hour in parts of the Northeast. Tuesday's totals in northern New Jersey ran 6 to 8 inches in 24 hours, with the intensity concentrated in far shorter windows. When rainfall exceeds a drainage system's capacity, there is no partial performance. Below the threshold it works. Above it, the water has nowhere to go, and it goes to the lowest available space. In New York, the lowest available spaces are subway tunnels, underpasses, stairwells, and basements. The third reason is the age and design of the sewer system. Large parts of New York City and many older cities in the Northeast are served by combined sewers, a 19th and early 20th century design in which the same pipes carry both stormwater and sewage to a treatment plant. In dry weather, this is efficient. In heavy rain, the volume overwhelms the treatment capacity, and the system is designed to discharge the excess, a combined sewer overflow, into the nearest waterway, because the alternative is sewage backing up into buildings. That means two things during an event like this week's. Water quality in local rivers and harbors degrades sharply, which is why swimming and contact advisories follow heavy rain, and the capacity available for stormwater is shared with everything else the system is already carrying. The fourth reason is the one that turns an infrastructure problem into a fatal one, and it took a hurricane for the country to notice. In September 2021, the remnants of Hurricane Ida moved over New York. Rainfall exceeded 3 inches per hour, well beyond the 1.75 the system was built for. Water filled subway tunnels, streets, and, critically, basement apartments. 41 people died across the metropolitan area. A large proportion of those deaths were in basement and cellar apartments. I want to explain why that specific category of housing is so lethal, because it is the clearest example anywhere of a hazard created by the interaction of physics and housing policy. A basement apartment is below street level. In a flood, water flows downhill, which means it flows toward the entrance. The pressure of accumulating water against a door that opens outward or against a window well can make it physically impossible to open. A few feet of water against a standard door exerts hundreds of pounds of force. Many of these units have one exit. Some have windows too small to climb through, or windows fitted with security bars. And a very large number of them are informal, converted without permits, not registered, not inspected, not built to any egress standard. Because they were never legally supposed to be dwellings at all. They exist because New York's housing costs are what they are. They are, for many families, the only affordable option in the city. They are occupied disproportionately by low-income households and by immigrants, and their informality means the people living in them are often reluctant to contact authorities about anything. So the population most exposed to death by urban flooding in New York is the population least visible to the systems designed to warn and protect it. An emergency alert reaches a phone. It does not tell you that the door will not open. After Ida, that became a major policy issue, with efforts to identify and legalize safe basement units and to improve outreach ahead of storms. It is genuinely difficult work. Legalizing an apartment requires bringing it up to code, which costs money and can result in the unit being lost entirely, which means losing the housing the city cannot replace. That tension has not been resolved, and every event of this magnitude puts the same population back in the same rooms. Now, the mechanism that made this particular storm behave the way it did. The thing that turns heavy rain into flash flooding is not intensity alone. It is intensity multiplied by duration over the same place, and the variable that controls that is storm motion. A fast-moving thunderstorm dumps a lot of water across a wide swathe, and no single point receives all of it. The same storm moving at walking pace delivers everything it has to one neighborhood. This system slowed down and intensified on Wednesday. It also produced repeated rounds, multiple waves of rain crossing the same areas in sequence, which is why the flood watch ran across 2 days rather than an afternoon. Repeated rounds are worse than one heavy round of the same total, because the first round saturates the ground and fills the drainage capacity. The second round arrives at a landscape that is already at its limit, so a smaller amount of rain produces a larger flood. That is why Wednesday's flooding in eastern New York was so severe, despite the storm having already spent much of its energy on New Jersey and Pennsylvania the day before. and underneath all of it sits the moisture supply. For every 1 degree Fahrenheit of warming, the atmosphere can hold approximately 4% more water vapor. The United States has warmed by nearly 3 degrees Fahrenheit on average since 1970, and the ocean surfaces feeding moisture into these systems have warmed too. That does not necessarily produce more storms. It produces storms with more available water to precipitate. The same weather pattern, in the same season, wrings out more. An analysis published by Climate Central in April 2026 measured this directly across 144 American cities. 90% of them showed increases in hourly rainfall intensity since 1970. Across the 129 cities with increases, hourly rates averaged about 15% higher than several decades earlier. 15% more intense per hour against drainage infrastructure whose design figure has not moved. That is the whole problem in one sentence. The rain got heavier. The pipes did not get bigger. Which brings us back to the number I opened with. 117 flash flood warnings issued this year by the Upton and Mount Holly Weather Service offices through the 29th of July. More than any year since the statistics began in 2008. And it is worth being precise about what a flash flood warning is, because there are 3 tiers, and they get used interchangeably in conversation. A flood watch means conditions are favorable, it is a heads up, issued hours in advance, covering a broad area. That is what covered the 5 boroughs in northern New Jersey on Tuesday. A flash flood warning means flooding is imminent or already occurring in a specific area. It is issued for a defined polygon, it triggers alerts on phones inside it, and it means act now. A flash flood emergency is the top tier, catastrophic damage occurring, severe threat to life. Nationally, the United States issued 15 of those between the 8th and 23rd of July alone, from West Virginia to Utah to New York to Texas. So 117 warnings in the tri-state in 7 months is not a measure of how much rain fell. It is a measure of how often forecasters concluded that people in a specific place were in immediate danger. And that raises a problem that nobody has a good answer to. Warning fatigue. An alert system works by being unusual. When your phone makes that noise, and it is genuinely rare, you look at it. When it happens repeatedly across a summer, in a metropolitan area of 20 million people where most recipients experience nothing worse than a wet commute, some fraction of people stop looking. This is not a criticism of the Weather Service. Each of those 117 warnings was, presumably, correctly issued for the area it covered. The problem is structural. Warnings are issued by polygon, and a polygon covering part of a dense metropolitan area contains many people whose specific street will be fine, and a much smaller number whose basement will not. The person who most needs to act on the alert, the family in a cellar apartment, the driver about to enter an underpass, the child near a swollen river, is a small minority of everyone who receives it. Solving that requires warnings that distinguish between the street and the basement, and no warning system currently does that at scale. Let me now be honest about what this week was and was not, because I have seen it described in ways that do not match the record. It was not New York's worst flood. Hurricane Ida in September 2021 exceeded 3 inches an hour and killed 41 people across the metropolitan area. The September 2023 event, when the remnants of Tropical Storm Ophelia stalled over the region, dropped 9.80 inches in Park Slope and caused around $100 million in damage, though with no fatalities. This week's totals were severe, and in some New Jersey towns exceptional, but the region has taken worse. It was not unprecedented. It was the same pattern the tri-state has now seen repeatedly. A slow-moving system, repeated rounds, drainage overwhelmed, water in the low places. And the storm has gone. As I record this, the region is drying out, with sunshine forecast and the next chance of storms not until the weekend. Anyone telling you this is ongoing is behind the news. But it was, by the count that actually measures danger rather than drama, part of the most warned year the tri-state has ever recorded. And at least one child died in a river in New Jersey. Both of those things are true at once, and the second is the one that matters. Here is what I'll be watching. The first is the final tally for the year, 117 warnings through the 29th of July, with the entire late summer severe weather season and the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season still to come. September and early October are historically when the tri-state takes tropical remnants. Ida was September, Ophelia was late September. Sandy was October. The 2008 to present record is going to be broken by a wide margin, and the question is by how much. The second is the Passaic search. If it has concluded, current reporting will tell you what I cannot. The third is basement apartment policy. This is the specific intervention with the highest lives saved per pound in the entire New York flood picture. And it has been stalled since Ida on a genuine dilemma. Legalizing an unsafe unit can mean eliminating housing that a family cannot replace. Watch for any program that funds egress improvements without evicting the occupants. That is the version that works. The fourth is drainage capacity. New York's 1.75 inches per hour has now been exceeded in named events in 2021, 2023, and 2026. Watch for any commitment to upgrade, and be realistic about it. Replacing sewer capacity beneath a dense functioning city is among the most expensive and disruptive infrastructure work that exists, measured in decades and tens of billions. The fifth is NOAA's precipitation frequency estimates. These are the reference documents engineers use to size drainage, culverts, and detention basins. If measured hourly intensity has risen 15% across most American cities since 1970, those design references need revising, and every system built to the old ones is undersized. That revision is unglamorous, technical, and more consequential than any individual storm. And the sixth is green infrastructure. Permeable pavement, bioswales, rain gardens, blue roofs. And simply removing concrete where it is not needed. None of it replaces the sewer network. All of it reduces the peak load reaching the sewer network, which is the only variable anyone can change quickly. I want to end where the week actually happened, which is not in a control room or a policy document. On Tuesday, in Paterson, New Jersey, 20 people had to be taken out of floodwater. On Wednesday, in Guilderland, New York, a man walked into waist deep moving water to carry a child out of a stranded car, and then went back to help someone else across. In Chatham, firefighters pulled a postal worker out of a delivery van. In Rockland County, police closed a road by a shopping center. And somewhere along the Passaic River in New Jersey, 2 10-year-olds went near water that looked the way it always looks, on a river that runs past houses and parks and playgrounds, after a day of rain. The storm that did that has moved on. The forecast is sunny. 117 warnings, and it is July. We'll be watching the tally through the autumn.